Hello, welcome to this channel, this podcast on healing anxious attachment style. I'm glad you found your way here, and I want to start by acknowledging you and honoring you for devoting your free time to connecting to this information and seeking out these resources. And I trust that if you are here, then you are on a heart healing journey as it relates to relationship to others, to dating, and to yourself. So I'm Johanna. I'm honored to be a guide and a teacher of this work and to be with you for many episodes and videos where we're going to dive into what it looks like to heal anxious attachment style. And the reason why I came to love this work so much is because attachment style can be healed. It's been proven time and time again that no matter what our attachment tendencies are, we can make huge strides in the experience that we have as far as the partners we attract, the partners we feel attracted to, how we feel in dating, and the level of self-worth and self-assuredness that we can bring into partnership so that we can cultivate a relationship that is deeply nourishing, profoundly loving, and very mutually beneficial and supportive and interdependent. So if that's something that sounds like it would be good for you and would feel good for you, then you are in the right place. In this first episode, I want to actually start by breaking down some of the myths around attachment style. First one being that I actually really love the words attachment tendencies or attachment adaptation instead, because what our attachment style really is an adaptation to what we experienced, most likely, with our early caregivers and parents. And in some cases, early romantic relationships can affect our attachment style, because our attachment tendencies, as I said, are a result of an experience that is generally a trauma. And that might be what we sometimes consider a big T trauma, like a one-off really traumatic event, or little T trauma, which is consistent, small misattunements or events where our nervous system was basically overwhelmed. And that results in a trauma to the nervous system and attachment system. So I don't want to throw trauma in here as this big scary word, but by definition, it is a trauma to have a non-secure attachment. So that's what we're working with, and it can be healed. So that's all to say that I might use the word attachment adaptation or attachment tendency instead of or as well as attachment style. But I think those words are powerful because it shows us that it's more than just it's more of a behavior tendency than something that we're necessarily stuck with. And that leads me to my second point, which is that when it comes to defining attachment styles, I think it's very satisfying to try and put it in these 4 boxes of secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. However, depending on who we're relating to, we can actually kind of shift into a different category or along the spectrum of avoidant or of anxious, with secure being in the middle. So if you are generally someone who is a little bit anxious, if we could name it as a percent, which we can't, but if we could, 20% anxious, and all of a sudden you are in a relationship with someone who is very, very avoidant, then that actually might make you shift a little bit more anxious. It really activates the tendencies more towards anxious. So then you might be feeling 40% or 60% anxious because this person is more avoidant. And then if you're with someone that's more secure, maybe your anxious attachment tendencies are actually less. Or if you're with someone else who's actually very anxious or presenting very anxious tendencies, that might make you feel a little more avoidant. So it's helpful to be able to see in which category our tendencies are most common. But what I think is even more supportive is seeing where we can actually maybe just play in the different camps and being able to work with that as that arises and be in tune with ourselves enough to see, oh, I'm actually being a little bit avoidant in this situation, I'm closing off in this situation, I'm trying to protect myself, or I'm feeling anxious in this situation, and I'm looking at this through the lens of fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of this relationship ending, and I'm now presenting jealousy, even though I know maybe it's unwarranted. So by giving ourselves this awareness, then we can make shifts towards feeling better and healing. Even still, even though we can present in different ways, there will probably be a dominant category that you fall into, and maybe we'll talk about it in this episode, maybe in future episodes, but I get the question a lot about, am I actually avoidant because I feel like I'm closing down and pulling away? And I actually developed a quiz called Which Anxious Attachment Are You?, where I really dive into the nuances, because I think that beyond the 4 categories that I listed here, even within the anxious attachment category itself, there's actually 4 different types that I have seen and uncovered with my work with hundreds of women. And so you can take that quiz for free. The link is in the description, and you can figure out which anxious attachment type are you. So let's take a deep breath here and just relax into the knowing that this is something that you can shift and heal. And before we get too much further into this episode, I do want to spend a little bit of time defining attachment style, where it comes from, why it happens, just so that we're all on the same page. So attachment style is the study of how we relate to others, our experience of love, what we learned about love, how it should look, how we need to be to get it, all of those different things. And our attachment tendencies are generally formed from a very young age, generally influenced by our initial caretakers, aka most often our parents or other prominent adults that were around taking care of you, and how that adult related and attuned to you. So the word attunement comes up a lot in attachment style, and what it means is how in tune or attuned the caregiver was to your needs as an infant. So as a child, we don't have language right away. We only have facial expression and body movement and cries. And what we want is for the adults around us to understand exactly what we need and give it to us accurately. But sometimes that doesn't happen. And it's not an easy task necessarily for a parent to be able to know exactly what we need. But as you can assume, our needs are, of course, food, water, shelter, but deeper than that, connection, presence, encouragement, feeling safe, and being able to regulate with an adult who has a regulated nervous system. So in the attachment style literature, it's often split up, as we said, into secure, avoidant, anxious, and disorganized. And I just want to define them quickly again to make sure we're all on the same page. So when we think of someone with a primarily avoidant attachment, that is the person that is generally more close to intimacy, keeping people at an arm's length. We often see the archetype of the lone wolf with avoidance. And why this presents this way is because this child was likely neglected or left alone too much for their age. And so because the caregiver was consistently not there, not meeting their needs, the child forms a belief system that says, okay, I can't rely on these adults around me to take care of me, so I need to be resourced completely within myself. And actually reaching for love, when I do as a baby, I'm consistently met with it not being there or rejection, these like little micro rejections. That feels really vulnerable and really painful. So it would be better for me to just close off and wall up and shut down and try and take care of myself. And so that belief could also potentially come with the story that relationships aren't important, or that people don't see me, or that people won't be there for me. And someone with an avoidant attachment style can feel very isolated within their own experience and obviously very walled off. So what happened in this case is they basically put the brakes on attaching and reaching for attachment, and now generally don't feel safe to connect with others. In the anxious attachment, the difference in the child experience is that in the case of the development of the anxious attachment, what the child perceived is that the parent was there and then not there. And sometimes they got their needs met and sometimes they didn't. And sometimes they assumed a situation was going to play out a certain way because in the past they felt supported and loved, but in this case, the parent actually was not available. And so it creates a lot of confusion for the child because of the inconsistencies. And it can feel like a situation where there's kind of like a rug pull, like you're anticipating something, again, as an infant with an infant brain, and a low amount of context and ability to understand what it's like to be an adult, but nevertheless, it's all we have to work with. So we become a bit unsure of what we're going to get. And this can happen in situations as seemingly innocent as a parent who goes to work and comes back because the child does not know that they are that the parent is going to come back. So in cases when moms have to go back to work when babies are super, super young, that alone can create this anxious attachment style. And the conversation about our parents and who they are and what they did it's really personal, and I don't want to write it off or make anyone feel like their parents were bad. Obviously, with my clients, we talk more specific about this in my group container, but for here, it's just a little bit too nuanced. So I'm going to leave that part of the conversation there and define for you disorganized attachment. So disorganized attachment is generally characterized by the words fear and terror. What happened for the child is that the same caregiver that was causing a lot of deep pain is still the caregiver that is responsible for love and survival. So a child who is naturally seeking comfort and protection from a loving parent is now looking for that in the same adult who is causing pain and harm or abuse. And this can come from physical abuse, sexual abuse, or just really unavailable, emotionally unavailable parent who is maybe caught up in their own experience, who is being abused by their partner, is lost in a loop of addiction, and there's a lot of trauma there. So that manifests as an adult, as a child who grows up into an adult that is quite stuck in dysregulation because of the fear that they experienced. If we are disorganized, it's really fundamental to be able to reestablish that fundamental sense of self-regulation and relative safety in relation to other people. If we are someone who is predominantly in anxious tendencies or anxious adaptations, then that person needs consistency and reassurance in order to go through the healing journey. And for an avoidant person, what's really important is creating more safety to connect in healthy ways. So you can see how, depending on the different tendencies, the prescription, so to speak, or what they really need in order to heal the nervous system in this way is different. So as I said in the beginning, I'm really here to focus on the anxious attachment style, but I just wanted to give a few definitions so that we know what we're talking about as the other words naturally come up. Anxious attachment is what I specialize in my practice with one-on-one clients and in my women's group, and it is the process and the healing journey that I went through. So for my anxious attachment girlies, you are in the right place. What I want to speak to now is something called the anxious avoidant loop, because it is very common for anxious people to be attracted to avoidant people, as you probably know. And from the anxious side, it felt very obvious to me why we would reach for avoidant people. It kind of fulfills our belief that people aren't going to give us love. And so it makes sense to reach for the person that's closed off, because we have a deeply ingrained belief that the love isn't going to be there when we want it to be there, or it's going to be hit and miss. And the avoidant style perfectly fulfills that prophecy. But on the other side, I always wondered, why are avoidant people attracted to anxious people if that sense of grasping and neediness that sometimes comes from the anxious person is actually really repulsive for the avoidant person? So what I read and found in that is that Avoidant individuals may have had these caregivers who were emotionally really distant or kind of dismissive. And that is reinforcing their preference for being emotionally independent. But at the same time, they really crave attention and wanting to be wanted. And so in the beginning, that initial desire that they feel from an anxious attacher who's going to really overgive and over show up and over care for them is really alluring, because it's validating the part of them that wants to be seen and chosen. But as soon as it becomes real or too much, or they feel the intensity of it, then the pullback and the pushing away from the avoidant happens. So I just wanted to share that because it kind of opened my mind about this dynamic and why it happens, and now I see where it makes sense. So now I want to move into the first step of the healing phase, which is actually reflecting on the patterns of our past relationships. So through the lens of anxious attachment style, what we tend to see as far as relationship patterns go is, of course, attracting avoidant partners, a lot of overthinking, questioning what we're saying, wanting a need for reassurance. Anxious attachment people might identify that words of affirmation are their love language, and I kind of have some beef to pick with the love languages because I see it through the lens of, is it your love languages or is it a trauma response? For example, is it my love language that I want words of affirmation, or is it my anxious attachment, aka trauma, that feels like I really need that in order to be validated? So yes, of course, I think there are healthy integrated desires for the love languages, and also we generally need all of them. So if I'm putting physical touch at the bottom of my love languages, is it that I don't need or want physical touch, or is it that I feel unsafe receiving physical touch because of the experiences that I've had? As an example, another tendency for the anxious pattern is a fear of abandonment. Also, really intense emotions and difficulty trusting. So these relationship patterns are what we want to identify within ourselves so that we know exactly what we're working with and what we're trying to shift. So overthinking, need for reassurance, fear of abandonment, really intense emotions, or having difficulty trusting. And I'll give you some examples and you can kind of see what feels the most true for you. The example is going to be cisgender heterosexual couple. Let's say the woman's named Sophia and the man is named Jason, and Sophia tends to have anxious tendencies. So Sophia tends to overthink things, and she worries that Jason might not be as interested as she is or as committed as she is. So that manifests as sending these texts like, do you still like me? Are we okay? Always feeling this sense of urgency that everything has to be okay, that everything has to feel very even-keeled. And what we see in that is a small capacity for her being able to handle the natural waves of polarity and connection. And also just the reality that people are busy and have other things that occupy their time and other things that stress them out. For the anxious attacher, it feels like I have to keep this ship calm or else it means something bad about me. Second example, in the fear of abandonment, this might be if Jason takes a little bit longer to respond or cancels a plan, even for a totally legitimate reason, it might really send Sophia's nervous system into thinking the worst, assuming he's losing interest, thinking he's probably planning to end the relationship. And this fear of abandonment is creating a lot of emotional turmoil for Sophia because she is spending a lot of time in this dysregulated nervous system state of panic, and is probably also calculating in her mind all of the ways that she can hopefully fix this or save this or stop this from happening. As far as the intense emotions go, for the anxious attacher, there can just be a lot of intense satisfaction when a relationship is going well, but also if there's a hint of miscommunication, then it can turn into a really deep spiral and experience of just being so upset over imagining these worst case scenarios. And maybe these examples that I'm giving are a little bit extreme. Maybe you don't go that far, but many, 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 many people do. And maybe you do. And I certainly did. And this panic and this unease and this worry can sometimes be very outwardly expressed, but sometimes it's just the experience that we have more internally as well. So these are the things that we want to work with, because what we're looking at when we see these examples are an energetic shape that our nervous system defaults to in response to an experience from our environment, the environment in this case being a partner that we're dating. So not only on an intellectual level are we having this experience, we're reading the text, and we might be able to say, okay, this is a legitimate reason that they canceled the plans, but then there's this other big flood of emotion, of feeling, of thought that comes with all these stories of, but what if it means that he's going to break up with me, or he's probably not going to make another plan, or he never wants to hang out with me again, or whatever the story is. And that's something that is bubbling up from deeper in our subconscious that's in some ways out of our control until we do the steps to look at what is in here, where does this stem from, and how can I regulate myself in the face of this intensity? How can I connect what my mind sees as reality and as okay with, and the part that knows it's probably okay, it's probably not like this, to the part that's feeling a lot of fear. And that process of being able to regulate our nervous system is through introducing healthy attunement and healthy attachment opportunities to our nervous system. And we can do that with ourselves. We can do that by what we allow ourselves to experience in relationship. We can do it with a coach, with a therapist. So I'll give you a few examples. With a friend, first example of how we can do this is really making sure that we slow down and experience and feel what it is that we're receiving in our relational dynamic. So sometimes that might be hard and true avoidance. And if that's the case, then maybe it's a scenario that we need to walk away from as we nurture and take care of our own nervous system and as we seek the road of healing and becoming more secure. But maybe we're actually with a partner who is giving us what we want, but we're putting way too much weight on the moments where we're not getting what we want, or we feel like we aren't being loved in the way that we want to be loved, and we're missing how much love, support, reassurance we are getting. And so it can be really healing to just slow down and look at, where am I getting reassurance? Where am I not being abandoned? Where am I being chosen? How does this partner communicate with me that makes me feel taken care of? And can I receive that? And then on an internal experience, doing the work to regulate our nervous system through my lens comes through somatic therapy. So somatic means in the body, and that's where we really work with the different energetic shapes, these postures that our body takes and the sensations that come with it in order to offer resolution and healing there on a deeper level. So, for example, if you think of your anxious attachment tendencies, it probably comes with some physical sensations. Maybe you haven't realized because it feels like it's very in your thoughts, but I'm betting that there's some tightness in your chest, a pit in your stomach. And what we can actually do is offer healing through these sensations. And so in response to your experience as a child, you had created these neural pathways that in your brain and your body that are attached to beliefs that say love is inconsistent, or everyone's going to leave me, or everyone's going to cheat on me, or I'm not worthy of this love, or I have to be a certain way to get this love. And that neural pathway just continues to run and run and run on a loop, and we live it out over and over and over in our adult experience until we shift and rewrite and change this pattern, which we absolutely can do. And somatic therapy is the predominant process that I use with my clients and in my groups and in my women's group. And the fastest way to get your hands on some intro to somatic therapy tools and also very deep somatic therapy tools would be to find me in my community, which is called Becoming Secure. This is both a community space and a classroom and coaching opportunity. There's a library that is filled with tools and prompts and guided somatic practices. So This is the platform, the place that I'm active with people every single weekday, supporting the women inside. You can come in and go through these guided practices and, of course, get to know the other women and hear their stories. Really not feel alone. You'll find very quickly that you are not alone in the experiences that you have, and it's going to be perfect for you if this podcast is speaking to you and you have a goal of being secure. It's really set up so that you can increase your confidence and your self-trust, and there's going to be a link for it in the show notes, the video description here. Just look for Becoming Secure and check it out. I would love to meet you inside. So thanks so much for being here with me, and in the next video I'm going to share some specific tools and techniques that allow us to soothe the anxious attachment, the anxiety in it, so that it's not dictating our response and communication and behavior in relationships. If this video has been helpful for you, definitely subscribe to this channel so that you are notified when new videos are coming out. There's at least 40 more videos coming for you. So thanks so much for being here with me. In the next episode, I'm going to be sharing some very specific tools and techniques that allow us to soothe the anxiety that is in the anxious attachment style so that it doesn't sabotage us or our relationships. If this video is helpful, definitely subscribe because there's so much more to come. I would love to hear your feedback. I want to make sure that what I'm sharing is what you need to hear and at the depth that you need to hear it, and anything else you want to share with me. So looking forward to hearing from you, and I will see you in another video.